This is Nilesh Agrawal, Indian Association of Greater Boston Director, IGB. I welcome you all for today's conversation with Nil Mishra, Indian American candidate for state representative, Salem, New Hampshire. IGB is an Indian American community organization dedicated to civic, community, social, and culture causes. Disclaimer for today's session, IGB is an political organization and does not endorse any candidate or party. Views are presented here are the candidate's own. Thank you. Over to you, Santosh.
So let's start with some little bit of discussion about Nil Mishra. First of all, I would like to introduce Nil. He's a young, dynamic candidate who is contesting in the state representative election in District 25 of Rockingham County in Salem, New Hampshire. Nil, elections are only 2 weeks down the line. First of all, I would like to thank you for finding a time in this busy schedule for the IGB community. I know that I'm talking to you for last 1 week or 2 weeks. You're always on the road and you really have a lot of things to achieve. So thanks for finding some time for us. So I will just start with a basic question. Can you just tell about yourself and why you decided to run this election?
Yeah, sure. And first of all, I want to thank you folks for hosting this event. Like you said, it's been a very busy campaign season, but I wanted to make sure that I made time to reach out to the Indian American community because as an Indian American myself, I think it's very important to have that sort of community connection. So just a little bit about myself and why I'm running. My name is Nil Mishra. I am a lifelong resident of Salem, New Hampshire, but I am also the proud son of 2 Indian immigrants. My father is from Kanpur and my mother is from Delhi, and they immigrated to the US in the 1980s to pursue their American dream. And then I came along. So I was born in Boston and grew up in Salem, New Hampshire my whole life. Graduated from Salem High School and then did my undergraduate at George Washington University, where I also interned for Congresswoman Annie Custer of 2nd District of New Hampshire. Thereafterwards, I did a master's degree at Oxford University, specializing in South Asian studies. While at Oxford, I was also elected vice president of the student union in the turnout election in university history. So you could say I have a good track record of winning elections. And I also served as a secretary for the Oxford India Society. And I was very active with the India Society, hosting events of interest to the Indian community in Oxford and in the UK. And now I'm back running for state representative. And I would say, to answer your question, there's been 2 key motivations for why I'm running. First and foremost, I see a gap in representation, especially in the state of New Hampshire. I do not see a lot of voices that reflect my voice. And what do I mean by that? I don't see that many people of color. I don't see that many Asian Americans, that many Indian Americans that are representing our community in the legislature. And I feel that I could give more of a voice to our community. And I also don't see a lot of young people that are in office. And how can you have the interests of young people represented when you don't have voices of young people there in the legislature? So I also want to give a voice to young people and the younger generation in the state legislature. And lastly, I've seen a lot of problems in terms of the way the state government has been running things, particularly attacking the rights of New Hampshire citizens, and also a great deal of fiscal irresponsibility. So my whole thing is common sense. I want to be a voice for common sense in the state legislature and restore common sense back to our politics. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about why I'm running for election.
Excellent answer, Neil. Definitely, we all, basically the people who are fiscal conservative and who are looking for this kind of candidates who is representing and giving a fresh idea and trying to use the little common sense to solve majority problem, or at least some of the important things to our day-to-day life.
Right.
I did go through your website, and you're basically going to tackle three major issues as per your campaign notes. First one is reproductive rights.
Mm.
Second one is the reduced energy bill. And the third one is protect the integrity of our public schools.
Mm.
All three are very important points. So can you elaborate a little bit on each of one, what you will be doing if get elected? And we would like to know, our community would like to know a little bit more about it.
Sure, absolutely. So in terms of the first one, reproductive rights. Um, Reproductive rights are under attack in the United States of America after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And they're also under attack here in the state of New Hampshire. And after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it's going to be up to all the various different states to make sure that our rights and women's in particular are protected. Here in New Hampshire, we have some very, very extremist bills on the table. For example, just in this last legislative session, the state legislature introduced a bill called HB 1477, and you can Google that. Basically, what it is a 6-week abortion ban. It would be one of the most extreme in the country. And many women, they don't even know that they're pregnant at 6 weeks. About a quarter of all pregnancies, they don't even know that they're pregnant at that point. So it would have been one of the most extreme abortion bans in the entire country. Another bill, extremist bill, that was introduced in the last session it's called HB 1181, and I like to call it basically the abortion veto bill. And basically what that one would do is if a woman gets pregnant, the prospective father, they can go to a judge and get an injunction. Is that woman, she can never get that pregnancy terminated. She can never get an abortion. So it's basically an abortion veto, and it's basically a way for men to control over women's bodies, which I think is absolutely wrong. I'm a strong supporter of women's rights. And if I'm elected, I will make sure that women's rights and reproductive rights are protected in the state of New Hampshire, because ultimately, to me, this is a medical decision. This is a medical issue, and it should be between a woman and her doctor. Government shouldn't have any sort of say in interfering with that. And I will make sure that people's private medical decisions remain private. Second thing that you mentioned, energy, also very important to me. New Hampshire actually has the second highest energy bills in the entire country. You know, compare ourselves to our neighbors over in Vermont, for example. Their electric bills have also gone up, but their average is about 2 to 4%. Here in New Hampshire, the average increase in electric bill has been 125%. So people here are getting crushed. They're seeing their electric bills double. And a big, big reason for that is that New Hampshire has a very, very undiversified energy base. So one of the first things that I want to do when I'm elected is diversify our energy base so that we aren't over dependent on just a couple of energy sources. And whenever the price goes up, everyone's on this crazy roller coaster ride of electric bill prices. I want to diversify our energy base so that people in New Hampshire aren't facing these crazy energy prices going forward in the future. And the last thing that you mentioned is education. I am a product of the New Hampshire education system, and I'm very proud of our education system over here. But there's one big problem that's been going on recently, and that is the state legislature and state government has introduced a program which basically takes taxpayer money, it siphons taxpayer money out of our public schools and uses that to subsidize private schools. Now, I have no problem whatsoever with people deciding to go private school. That is their right, that's their option. However, what I do have a problem is stealing taxpayer money to subsidize private schools. I think that's wrong. I think that's an inappropriate use of taxpayer dollars. And what that will ultimately do is there will still be a gap in the budget for the funding of public schools. So what that is going to do is jack everyone's property taxes way, way, way up. The Republicans in the state legislature, what they budgeted for this program, they budgeted, get this, they budgeted $129,000 for this program. It has now cost $14 million, putting it 6,000% over budget. And of course, it's going to be the people of New Hampshire that will have to make up that crazy extra cost with their taxpayer dollars. I think that's inappropriate. When I'm elected, I'm going to get rid of that program and put that money back to our public schools, make sure our schools are well funded so that we have a strong, robust school system for our children going forward.
Thank you very much for giving all the insights. We really appreciate it. Just a follow-up question on item number 1, which is basically you're talking about reproductive rights. Many of the item number 3 also, many of the things basically right now, everything goes on the party line. How you're going to achieve this, what you're going to do different to go across the aisle and try to bring the nation together, not the party alone.
Right. Yeah.
So my whole to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. So my whole thing is I'm not overly emphasizing party identity. I think it's become too tribal these days. I think there's too much conflict. We need less conflict and more people coming together, just like you said. And in terms of bringing people together, my whole thing is common sense and reflecting what the people want. And what the people want, you can look at the numbers. Regardless of party affiliation, regardless of if you're a Democrat, regardless of if you're a Republican, regardless of if you're independent, the overwhelming majority of people in New Hampshire, they want to protect abortion rights. Over 71% of people in New Hampshire, regardless of party affiliation, want to protect reproductive rights. So I'm happy to work with anyone. It doesn't matter what party you are registered with. It doesn't matter what affiliation you have. So long as we can find some common ground in terms of our values, and I believe that I am representing the values of the majority of people in New Hampshire, I think we can come together on these issues and look towards common sense solutions.
Very well said, Neil. That is what I also like to hear. So thank you for giving an answer to the follow-up question. I have the next question for you is, you made a statement in your website that I can provide a better leadership than a status quo. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that statement. What is the thought behind it?
Right.
Why did you say that? And we would like to know more context.
That's a great question. I'm really glad you asked that question. I believe, and this goes back to a lot of the things that we were talking about earlier, I believe the current leadership in Concord in the state legislature has not accurately represented the views of the people of New Hampshire. And great example is that reproductive rights issue, right? 71% of people in New Hampshire are in support, and yet you have a big chunk of the legislature and you have a bunch of politicians that are explicitly running to take away reproductive rights. And that is a very pervasive issue within the status quo leadership, within the current leadership of the state. So I think that I can provide a fresh voice, a fresh perspective that is more in line with what the people in New Hampshire want. Because I think a big part of the issue is, a lot of people, they have busy lives, they're busy with work, they're busy with school, they're not entirely aware of what's going on in the state legislature, which is not their fault whatsoever. People have busy lives and it's hard to keep track of everything. But I think once people do realize what's going on in the state legislature, they step back for a second and think, hey, wait a minute, that's not what I want. That's not what I voted for. That's not, representing my interests. And I think there has been sort of a breakdown in the relationship between the current leadership and the people living in New Hampshire and not accurately representing their interests. So I think that I can provide a fresh voice that will mix up the leadership and provide a new perspective that is more representative of what people in New Hampshire want.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I would like to ask next question. You already covered a little bit of it. You are the son of both Asian immigrants, and you are basically running for an elected position at a quite young age. So what kind of message you want to give it to Asian immigrants who wants to run for any elected positions?
Absolutely.
Any kind of message or advice?
We need more Asians running, and we need more young people running. And the biggest bit of advice that I could give is that I think for a lot of people, they have this passion, they have this motivation to serve their community, but they feel a bit intimidated because they feel like, you know, my voice, they won't listen to me, I don't feel represented, it's very scary, it's very intimidating. And these are all very understandable feelings. I felt these feelings as well. But my most important bit of advice and message would be, you can do it too. You can do it too. It doesn't take any, special genius or special skill or anything like that. The most important thing is that you just have to believe that you can do it. And once you have that belief in yourself, you can have the capability to run and to represent your community. Because I think a lot of people, they just feel a little bit intimidated by the whole process, and they feel overwhelmed, and they feel like that they'd have a hard time doing it themselves. But I think so long as you get this message and you're hearing, I'm telling you right now that you don't have to doubt yourself. You don't have to be scared. I know that you can do it. I felt doubts as well, but it will turn out perfectly fine. And we just need more diverse representation. We need more young people. We need more Asian representatives in our state and throughout our country. And if you just believe that you can do it, it is entirely possible.
Thanks, Neil. One more question. I'm running out of questions.
Sure.
I just wanted to ask you about what kind of message you would like to give it to our community in general.
Sure.
So please proceed.
So if I'm elected, I would be the first ever Indian American to represent this district. I'm very, very proud of my Indian heritage, and I'm very glad to be part of this conversation with the Indian American community. I think in order to see more Indian Americans in office, we all need to collaborate and we need to work together. It's a team effort. And so long as our community comes together and rallies around Indian American leadership representatives, we can get more representation for our community, and we can have our voices heard in a way that hasn't been heard, in the last several years.
Thank you very much. I would like to, first of all, thank you very much for giving us a time. I wanted to open up a session for everyone to ask any questions. There are 7 or 8 people who are really knowledgeable about economy. I won't use the word politics, the community. They are very knowledgeable about it, so they can ask any question directly to Neil. And then after that, we will close the discussion. Please go ahead. If anybody has any questions, Vaishali, Nilesh, Vikas, Jenny, Asha, you can unmute and ask.
I can go first if you want, Santosh.
Yeah, please.
By the way, IGB, thank you for arranging this. And Neil, really good to see like an Indian American, standing for this position, showing our strength. My question is related to the productivity that you mentioned that you're going to support. I just wanted to know how, what's your plan? How would you, what would you do to support, the abortion rights for women?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. My first priority would be in the state of New Hampshire. There is actually no legal guarantee whatsoever in terms of reproductive rights and a woman's right to choose. So my first priority would be to introduce and sponsor a bill that specifically enshrines reproductive rights in the state of New Hampshire, because right now we don't have that. You can look through all the laws and all the books of the state of New Hampshire. There isn't a single law that specifically protects the right to an abortion and reproductive medical rights for women in the state of New Hampshire. So that would be my first priority. I would introduce a bill to permanently enshrine reproductive rights for all women in the state of New Hampshire.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Ginny is one of our IGB director. She's very basically very active in many community events. Anybody else has any questions? Vaishali, I think you want to ask something.
Yeah, I do. So Neil, once again, thank you so much for joining us this evening, despite your busy schedule. And wonderful to see a young Indian American kid taking this step to represent us in the legislature and in the government. My question is, I saw on your website, and I have been following you for a while now, cannabis. I mean, I know cannabis is not really legalized in New Hampshire, and I know one of the goals that you have set is to legalize cannabis. Just curious if that is such a low-hanging fruit, are there any other constraints that are stopping it from being legalized?
Well, the constraint right now is the government. That's the big one. And that's the one that I want to address. So every other New England state surrounding New Hampshire has already done legalization. And to me, it's a common sense revenue issue. We need more sources of revenue in the state of New Hampshire because otherwise we're getting killed with high property taxes. And so Massachusetts has already done it, Maine's already done it, Vermont's already done it. And the problem with that is when we don't do it, all that money that we could make in this state is just leaking across the board to other states. And we could use that money right here in the state of New Hampshire to fund our governments and fund our state activities. So long story short, the main impediment is the state government. Right now, 75% of people in New Hampshire support legalization. And actually that sort of goes back to the question that Santosh Uncle had earlier in terms of, gaps in representation. That is another big gap in representation because the majority of people in this state, they support legalization, and yet the current status quo leadership that's in charge, they haven't done anything about it. It's still not been done. It's been on the docket for years and years now, but we haven't seen anything concrete done. So if I'm elected, I would make sure that we change that we get momentum behind that to make sure that we get a legalization bill through, because to me at this point, it's just a question of common sense. It doesn't make any sense for us not to do it while all the other surrounding states have already done it. And I'll make sure to get the ball rolling on that and introduce legislation to get that corrected.
Okay, great. I know probably you are seeing all the disadvantages and now it's just time to reap the benefits. So great. Thank you. More power to you.
Thank you. Anybody else has any question?
Yeah, hi. Hi, Neil. Congratulations. The country is divided and a lot of people see Asians as threat, right? And they have been attacked in a negative way. What is your vision, to help the community so that, we get uplifted, we get recognition that, no, we are contributing right? We are contributing to the community and the success of this country. So what is your take on it? Yeah.
That's a great question. I'm really glad that you asked that. It is such a crucial issue right now. There has been a massive uptick in hate crimes against Asian Americans, against the Asian American community. It's wrong. It's morally repugnant. It's disgusting. And like you said, Asian Americans and Indian Americans, they're hardworking members of the community. They contribute to their states. They contribute to this country. They contribute to the economy, and they should never have to face any sort of discriminatory treatment like this, which is absolutely morally repugnant. So I would say there are two sort of solutions on that front from my perspective. Number one is providing visibility, right? Because if people aren't aware of these kind of issues, they're not going to take action. So if I'm elected, I will absolutely use my platform to highlight this problem, to highlight this key issue that the Asian American community is facing with all these sorts of hate crimes and discriminatory attacks. I think once we have more visibility, once we project our voice, and once we get our issues out there and get our issues heard, there'll be more momentum towards taking action. And the other thing that I would support is sort of looking at more disciplinary measures for when hate crimes do occur, making sure that they are sanctioned and punished appropriately so that we have a deterrent for those kinds of crimes going forward. So those would be sort of the two main fronts I think I would address.
Yeah,
Thank you for asking that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for addressing it. Basically, yes.
Thanks, Asha.
Making people aware. Yeah.
Asha is another very active community member. She's a part of IGBECs. Thanks, Asha, for doing that, asking question. Anybody else has any question, Vikas? Or
is Nilesh has any question, or can I jump in?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks Santosh, Vaishali, and all the IGB team for organizing this thing and inviting me also. Good to see you, Neil, again, and
it's good to
hope
see you again.
See you in State House soon.
Absolutely.
State House, yeah. So that's all the best for that. Very quick question. I mean, knowing the demography a little bit about Salem and so it's a two-point question actually.
Sure.
It's more related with education. So about what are your points about education in general?
Sure.
And as well as being when you grow up in as an Indian American, particularly in this area, how and you have your own experiences, and I'm not going to ask right now due to time constraint how your experiences were, but how can you be a role model for the next generation of Indian Americans, particularly, and in general for anybody immigrant?
Sure. Sure. So for your first question, in terms of education, New Hampshire has a fantastic education system, one of the best in the country, and indeed a world-class education system. The main and most important thing for me is to ensure sustained funding for our schools, make sure that our schools, our teachers, our classrooms are appropriately funded. And it kind of goes back to one of the issues that I was talking about earlier in terms of the state government trying to siphon money out of public schools, out of the public school system, which obviously is a detriment to our children. 90% of the children in the state of New Hampshire are in public schools. If we take money away from those public schools, it's going to undermine their quality of education. So most important thing for me is preserving education funding in the state of New Hampshire. And the second issue that you mentioned is role models in the future. Sorry, 1 second. Second question, role models. I think so long as people in the community can see leaders that come from their community, that represent their interests, that represent their ideals, that represent their background, I think there's sort of an inspiring effect, and there's sort of a snowball effect. Once you see representation that looks like you, that represents your interests, you feel more motivated yourself to get involved in civics, in the political process. So my hope with this campaign is if I can at least, if there's at least one positive outcome, it's that other people in the community get inspired, get motivated to further participate in the political process and make sure that our community's voice is heard.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Vikas. Excellent question. Nilesh, you would like to ask any question?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, first of all, you already told me that you have a cutoff at 8 o'clock, since we are already past 5 or 6 minutes. okay, beyond 8. So I would like to thank you, Neil, for finding a time, half an hour with us and educating our community about your perspective of the candidacy. And we will definitely, as I said, that we will not take anybody's side. We are independent. We are a non-profit organization. But whatever is your message, we will try to give it to the social media, and we will do that for any candidate who likes to come to our platform. So thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you very much.
Thank you.